Hi, I'm Nathalie Edmond, Director of the Counseling Center at Villanova University, and I'm excited to join my colleagues at the Counseling Center to talk about common stressors that racially minoritized individuals or BIPOC individuals or people of the global majority experience at a predominantly white institution. So here I welcome my colleagues.
Hi, I'm Nona Sharp. I'm one of the counselors here at the Counseling Center.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Curtis. I'm also a counselor at the Counseling Center.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cap. I'm one of the clinical coordinators at the Counseling Center and also a counselor.
Great. So thinking about working at a predominantly white institution, and some of us have gone to predominantly white institutions, what would you say are some of the common themes or stressors that you each have heard from students? I'll start with you, Nona. Dr. Sharp.
Yeah, in working with a lot of BIPOC identified students over the year, I found that a lot of them have the same friend groups and social circles and just find each other one way or another, either through sports or CASA or OUS or just hanging out in different spaces. So the community finds each other, like we find community, but sometimes that community and that support can cross a line because there tend to be like so few students and the community just tends to be smaller. Those like tight-knit circles end up kind of like crossing boundaries or maybe just showing up for each other in ways that sometimes might do a little more harm than good, with well intentions, but also in a way that's not the most healthy. Like there isn't a lot of boundary setting, and there isn't a lot of kind of independence. Sometimes there's a lot of codependence. So just trying to navigate what that looks like and how we can help our community to function a bit healthier.
So trying to find the dance between showing up for each other in community and yet also having some healthy boundaries within those interactions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Great. How about you, Dr. Curtis?
Yeah, something that shows up or themes that I've seen are like a lack of belongingness on campus. So students, even though they do feel like they have community within like these small, I don't know if you call it like subgroups like of the community, they don't feel like they belong to like the larger group of Villanova. And so that can leave a lot of space for many different negative feelings to come up and negative self-esteem and just have like a negative impact overall on well-being. So
yeah, and so thinking of some things we've as a group talked about is like, what's the difference between inclusion and belonging, right? Is like, so what does it mean to be in an institution that values diversity, that values care and truth and taking care of each other, and yet if you're one of the only on campus or in a class, feeling like can your authentic racial self show up? All of who you are can be valued without the need to assimilate or the need to code switch.
Right.
How about you, Cap?
I would echo what Dr. Sharp and Kirsten said. Sorry, Dr. Curtis, sorry. But I think that most of what I've seen so far this semester, because I'm fairly new here, is the lack of belonging and the lack of inclusion often yields loneliness, which then gets put onto the institution. So then it becomes this systemic battle almost, where a lot of students will say, okay, because we don't belong into our microcosm, we haven't found our people yet. We also don't belong to those people and or to the institution as a greater whole. The only option that we have is to bounce. And so a lot of folks are leaving, and that ripples into almost every realm of PWIs here at Villanova, I've seen a number of individuals leave their athletic scholarships because they just don't feel belonging or included, and that loneliness just permeates, and so they opt for a BIPOC centric university. And so that's something that, you know, needs to be addressed and looked at and spoken to.
So, you know, I think about like, what does it mean to come to a predominantly white institution, and you have the typical stressors that you have adjusting to a new institution. And then on top of that, when you're a racially minoritized or Black, Indigenous, or other person of color, right? What are the other stressors that you're experiencing that just aggravate or intensify or make you more vulnerable to stress or mental health issues? And we want to encourage students to come to the counseling center, to access UWIL services, which is our online telehealth services outside of the counseling center. All of these services are free and confidential. Any other stressors that we tend to typically see on campus? You know, this idea of that we've been talking about lately of this, there's so few spaces in predominantly white institutions to bring your authentic racial selves, which is so important for one's mental health, for one's confidence, to avoid things like maybe to reduce vulnerability to feeling like an imposter, and thinking about this idea of so many of us are socialized in order to be successful in predominantly white institutions to cultivate this white appeasing self. And, you know, I know all of us have talked about, like, I know for myself personally that sometimes it's so ingrained in me that I don't even recognize that I'm code switching or my white appeasing self is showing up. But I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, like, how are we mindful of our white appeasing self showing up, or what does that even look like? And it's not a bad thing, you know, but it probably comes at a cost if it's done all the time.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I can just go really quick. I would say that, you know, this concept of white appeasing self, like I've noticed in myself that it comes up a lot when, you know, maybe white colleagues or peers will ask me something, and I will have like, I'll gaslight myself. Like I'll have like my authentic experience internally, but, you know, instead of just like answering the question authentically, I'll, you know, go through this internal process of like filtering out, you know, like what is acceptable, like what can I bring forward, you know, like what will be the most comfortable for, you know, the person that I'm speaking to, like, because I don't want to disrupt, you know, the equilibrium in the room. And so that's how I've noticed and been more mindful. I like the name, the white appeasing self, because it does allow me to be more mindful of like what's happening in that process. So yeah.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Like that really resonates with me, Kirsten. And the other thing that I was going to add on to that is from my own experience back when I was an undergrad, being in a PWI and also working with students that come to the counseling center, you know, a big stressor that white students never really face or very rarely face are like being the only one in a class. So if you're the only person of color in a class, and you're talking about racial stress, or you're talking about something, you know, in our society's history or in our country's history, and the professor and all your peers are talking about it as if it's like this historical fact or like theory or like something intellectual that doesn't really happen to real people. Meanwhile, like it is a real thing for you or for your family members or for your community. Or you've seen it happen in the news or just like, and it's a very like emotional and real experience, not just this kind of ambiguous concept in a textbook. And I think that sometimes the white appeasing self can show up in those classes where you have to, you know, participate in class because participation is part of the grade, or you have to write a paper, whatever the case is, where you have to kind of separate yourself from the topic, which I think if you have done it enough because you've been in these classes enough, it happens automatically. But if we sit back and kind of reflect on like our white appeasing self, we can see like that can actually be a really like painful experience. So just being able to reflect on that, and maybe it doesn't happen in class because that's not realistic or really safe to do, but just like in your dorm or, you know, somewhere private, just reflecting like, you know, the things that are talked about in class or, you know, in the news or whatever. It's okay to have an emotional reaction to it, not just like an intellectual reaction or thought.
Right. And that even when that white appeasing self is showing up because it's a skill, it's a strategy, it helps us be successful, or it at least keeps us safe or safer, to recognize that stress, that labor, our bodies are still experiencing it. Even if our mind is like, it's fine, but our bodies are still experiencing that stress. We're still having that cortisol secretion. That's part of the racial stress and trauma. So that even, you know, some of us experience overt acts of racism, and some of us experience more the daily microaggressions or slights or indignities, or even this sense like, oh, this place wasn't built for people like me, or wasn't built for people, for my ancestors. And I think like part of the stress sometimes is the policing of our bodies, policing of our speech, policing of like the ways when we show up more authentically, perhaps that is policed, that's highlighted in a way that other people are able to show up more authentically. And I think part of the college experience is, I think, partly like not only getting an education, but also settling into like who we are. What are we taking from our family of origin? What are we taking from our culture? What are we paving as something new for ourselves? And all of that can be really confusing. And I hope that you all have your people, or would consider the counseling center as a place to have some of that support. What other tips we want to maybe think for people? Cap.
I think a large amount of what Nona and everyone has shared, Kirsten. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. I think it's really important to just acknowledge the fact that if you go to PWIs and you're accustomed to the people pleasing and like the fear-based responses based out of judgment or the systemic oppression that, you know, we're all product of, you sometimes can lose track of who you actually are. So reinvigorating with you in those moments, knowing that you can show up authentically and there won't be any retaliatory, you know, repercussion. And in fact, you know, even in PWIs, it's often embraced. And not to go off this political campaign of like DEI inclusion, and it's not, you know, an advertisement, but more so it's definitely something that's valued. And especially here at the counseling center, I think we're looking to be able to be supports to these individuals so they can truly find themselves and live their authentic selves throughout.
Love that. Well said. Any other final thoughts as we wrap up this conversation? Well, you know where to find us. Hopefully check out our webpage, check out our YouTube channel. Feel free to drop in and see the ways that we can support you or answer any questions or support you in getting services off campus if that's a better service for you. Take care, everyone.